Our submission for the 2025 World Economics Cup Thinking and Innovation Continental Round. Our team includes
Carlton Chu,
Zayu Ma,
Yuchen Su,
Jaren Bao.
and we are from Oxford International College.
So the first question is about the impact of ride-sharing platform using dynamic pricing. So on the demand and supply. So and price P, there's an excess demand, so the price has to increase to ration it out. Therefore, the quantity demanded has to decrease from Qn to Q1, as people are willing to wait until the price drops or switch to other transportations. The quantity supplied will increase from Q to Q1 as there's a higher fare, which makes this business more profitable. More drivers will provide services. So this will increase from Q to Q1 and forming a new equilibrium. For C, the price elasticity of supply is 2, as we can see the solution right here. It's price inelastic.
The sharing economy, an economic system in which assets and services are shared between individuals in private. However, there are possibilities of information asymmetry. Trust mechanisms try to minimize this by courtesy of public opinion, online reviews, user reputation, and use of certification by third-party inspectors. However, these have some potential limitations. The reliance on user reviews would accentuate bias. User reviews are subject to a behavioral economic concept known as negative reviewer bias, the tendency of dissatisfied customers to be more motivated to leave reviews, and there are also fake online reviews. The benefits of an alternate method, which I will propose, is the blockchain-based trust system. It is a decentralized ledger that records all transactions and reviews in the sharing economy, increasing trust and reducing information asymmetry. It also has informational integrity, and it protects against fraudulent reviews, and they are also decentralized, so prevents mass manipulation of data. There are some negatives, such as people struggling to adjust to use it, such as the older generation, regulatory compliance with privacy laws, and also substantial investment necessary to develop the system.
So next is about the casualization of labor and erosion of worker protections. So why businesses classify workers as independent contractors is actually to reduce fixed labor costs and increasing cost competitiveness. Unlike former employees protected under various regulations, independent contractors are excluded from various benefits. And this can also lead to downward pressure on their earnings because of things such as absence of minimum wage entitlements, leading to higher profit margins. And there are 2 types of negative production externality arising from this. The first is uncompensated fiscal burden, which is basically an external cost not compensated by those businesses, which are incurred to the government because of more reliance on publicly funded welfare programs. And there's also a problem of unfair competition, which arises because of artificial cost advantage of those businesses, leading to distortion in market competition and market inefficiencies. And the way to solve this can be establishing a new legal category of dependent contractor, status between formal employee and independent contractors. This will ensure that the job is still flexible for firms, but workers will be guaranteed protections. By establishing this, businesses will find it harder to classify workers as independent rather than dependent contractors. Therefore, the unfair cost gap will be narrowed and therefore can partially address the unfair competition issue.
Moving on to the general economic problem. The crux of the issue for this town is that they are experiencing urban resource compression, which is a clash between 2 driving economic forces, one of tourism-driven demand and local housing needs, of which they are competing for the same finite resources. STRs, which are short for short-term rentals, intensify this pressure by channeling investment in space towards short-term, high-return use goods, which then leads to crowding out longer-term socially vital functions. This results in market imbalance where private profitability exceeds public sustainability. Our key criteria, our evaluative criteria, includes allocative efficiency, whether or not the housing is allocated to those generating the highest long-run marginal social value, dynamic stability, whether or not housing supply and affordability is optimal over time, and finally, functional equity and equity of access pertaining to the standards of living in the area. Specific analysis of the core challenges faced, which will use these economic criteria, include a distortion in the housing market, where STRs provide high nightly returns, causing landlords to convert long-term housing into short-term tourist accommodations. This drives up rent as supply of housing is reduced for residents. This causes a price signal, according to Hayek. producing micro units or flats, for example, tailored to tourists and not families. This violates allocative efficiency, where housing is no longer used in ways that reflect its highest community-wide value. There's also intertemporal viability, as incentives created drive myopic planning. Short-term gain is prioritized, and long-term investment in stable housing is decreased. STR-suited stock is also overproduced, whilst rising local need is ignored. This leads to supply gaps and rising volatility, in which housing is treated as a seasonal asset and not a durable good, which undermines dynamic stability. There are also concerns in the labor market where jobs like teachers, baristas, nurses, and other core workers are priced out. This reduces the service capacity in the locality and makes labor markets less flexible. Turnover rises as businesses struggle to hire more and more. The economy becomes bifurcated, profitable for investors, but unsustainable for residents. This violates functional equity, where those who create community value are pushed to its margins. The STRs also bring unpredictable surges in population that burden local roads, utilities, and public services. These systems, which are designed for steady state use, wear out much faster and cost more to maintain. Tourists who contribute minimally to local tax base consume these peak level infrastructure. This overuse without matching investment leads to a tragedy of the commons, to which longer term sustainability is compromised. The figure you see below showcases a graph which is built from urban STR case studies, considering factors like volatility and substitution, where capacity is abstracted. Moving on, we have our solutions to which we hope will solve this problem.
Solution 1 is a platform quota auction system, PQAS, is a legally enforced system by the government that enforces the needs of short-term rental licenses to be able to host a short-term rental property, and thereby increasing the barriers to entry for STRs. It is a tradable license that can be sold off when excess, and plays a key role in negotiation that I will talk about later. It also, in this case, negotiation can lead to the prevention of housing crisis. The economic logic behind this is the use of PQAS would lead to an inelastic supply of STR properties, which would effectively alleviate pressure from the housing crisis. The quota system is based off the Kosei theorem that suggests that when transactional costs are low and property rights are clearly defined as they are here, private parties are able to negotiate economic outcomes that are efficient. Moreover, this concept it also touches on concepts of market design to improve inefficiencies in the current market mechanism. A real-world example would be Yosemite National Park in the US, which uses this system to regulate the amount of people during peak months. The benefits of this system would be, with the implementation, by issuing tradable licenses, which are required to host an STR, it would constrain the supply of STRs, and as you can see in the diagram to the left, supply is completely inelastic. This would then increase the price of short-term rentals, increase the demand for long-term rentals, allowing for local residents cheaper housing by courtesy of the price of substitutes rising. Furthermore, the low reliance of the economy on short-term renting would lead to a more stable government income due to the low reliance on seasonal income, and in turn lead to a more stable economy, and more macroeconomic supply-side policies can be used later. Unintended consequences include local businesses which are caught in the crossfire, tourist destinations, tourist-dependent attractions that are all going to receive revenue cuts, layoffs due to said revenue cuts to handle costs and regulatory challenges to actually implement the PQAS, such as hiring inspectors. Moving on to solution 2.
So solution 2 is basically use it or rent it vacancy tax. And this tax is a tax imposed on properties that could be lived and have not been have been stayed for less than a certain period of time. Since most of this tax is directed towards properties, but for speculation or use only for a short period, this will effectively discourage homeowners to leave their homes vacant for long, incentivizing provision of rentals or selling their houses. And the real-world example of this application is in Vancouver, where the vacancy homes tax was implemented in 2017. And between 2017 and 2020, the vacancy rate for houses dropped dramatically, and more than 15,000 properties were either rented or sold due to reduced incentives to leave the houses unoccupied. And meanwhile, the government could raise the tax revenue of around 115 million Canadian dollars in the first few years, which could be reinvested into affordable housing initiatives. And there are some considerations for the trade-off. And the good side is it makes housing price more affordable. As showcased in Vancouver, imposition of vacancy tax can significantly reduce the vacancy rate and redirect their uses to rentals or encourage transference of home ownership. Moreover, in long-term perspective, vacancy tax would discourage foreign speculators to purchase houses in local area. And therefore, locals would be able to access long-term rentals and home ownerships at a more affordable level. And the government could also reinvest this tax revenue. The impact for broader economy is that some of the properties used for short-term rentals, such as Airbnb, could be subjected to vacancy tax. And as the supply of short-term rentals falls, price of short-term rentals is likely to increase, reducing the inflows of tourists, especially during peak months. This may lower profits for local markets, targeting tourists as the demand for their goods and services decreases. Hence, this deteriorates local economic activity. And there are applications of economic concepts available here. And the first is multiplier effect, which states that the fall in initial injection into the economy, in this case is a tourist consumption, can lead to a greater fall in overall economic output. And this can not only affect local GDP, but also can spill over to the whole national economy, harming overall economic growth. And there's also a problem of negative externality, and a continued increase in the number of tourists can lead to underutilization of housing for long-term rentals. And while the private property owners are responding to price signals to increase profit, the induced upward pressure on long-term rents induce negative external costs to renters. And this underutilization may also impose fiscal pressure on governments to expand social housing programs, etc. These third-party harms are not reflected in the private market decisions. This signals allocative efficiency. And here are some demonstrations of how it can turn out. So vacancy tax can obviously address the under-provision of long-term rentals by shifting the supply curve to the right. And the dead weight loss of welfare due to under-provision can be partially addressed as the quantity of long-term rentals, as you can see on the graph, will shift towards the optimal quantity. And for the tax revenue and government spending, the government would need to weigh the trade-offs associated with the tax rates, because while the government may set the tax rate based on its predicted impact on the supply of long-term rentals, if the government anticipates the impact of government spending, such as public housing constructions on housing price, to be greater, the government needs to consider these impacts of different tax rates.
Okay, so the third solution is a community land trust. This is a non-profit community control organization that buys and holds land permanently, so it can be used for the affordable housing. This trust keeps ownership of the land and grants non-renewable ground leases, often 99 years, to people or developers who own or rent the buildings on it. Those leases include in release and rent caps, so each home stays affordable for the next household instead of being resold at the full market price. Governance is typically shared among its residents of CLA homes, which keeps the decisions accountable and mission-focused. CLA can acquire motels and offices and convert them into long-term rental properties, thereby increasing the housing supply, addressing the affordability crisis, while having no negative impact on short-term rentals and tourism. At the same time, a portion of the revenue generated from the tourism-related taxes could be directly to fund this trust, creating a sustainable link between the town's economic engine and its housing needs. Next slide. Next. So, the economic theory suggests the key advantage of the CLA model. Firstly, is about the Austrian framework of commons management demonstrates how community control resources can achieve superior outcomes to both pure markets and government intentions. Second is like the trust creates what economics call market matching affordability. Unlike rent controls, which distorts price, CLTs use deep restrictions to maintain affordability while allowing modest equities. There are some empirical evidence from comparable markets proves this model's efficacy. In Walmart, the Campaign Houses Trust has maintained 98% occupancy rates while keeping house affordable for households earning 60% of area median income, all while surrounding market rate housings becoming increasingly unaffordable. And there are some downsides for this solution as well. It included high criteria or too dependent on the government subsidies or high taxes. Okay, conclusion.
In conclusion, the popularity of tourism in these coastal towns triggered a rapid expansion of the number of short-term rentals. This results in a local housing and affordability crisis. Our solutions, respectively being the platform quota auction system, our user-rented vacancy tax, and the CLTs, represents a unique approach which will ultimately increase the housing supply of long-term rentals, where vacancy tax will act as an incentivizing tool for renting out houses in the long term. The CLT trust will provide sustainable rent without impacting tourism, and the platform quota auction will consistently be able to maintain both the short and long-term supply of rentals, leading to an increase in the demand and stability of the economy. Overall, these solutions together form a robust and reinforced plan that ensures long-term housing affordability, economic stability throughout all seasons, and allows for the alleviation of the current housing crisis. Thank you very much, and this concludes our submission for the continental round.